What's up, everybody? CT back with my 2014 SEC football preview, and it is time to talk about the Vanderbilt Commodores. So, James Franklin decided to leave Vanderbilt and become the head coach of Penn State. So, a lot of turmoil from what I've heard about that exit. Apparently, that he knew that he was going to leave Vanderbilt before a lot longer than he let on. And I've heard a few things. I don't know if what's true and what's not, so I'm not going to get that much into that. But he was a very good coach, one of my favorite coaches in the country. I think it's a tremendous loss for Vanderbilt to lose him. But they hire Derek Mason, and this will be his first year. And they hire him out of Stanford, who he was the defensive coordinator of that just grueling Stanford defense, one of the best defenses in the country. And I think it's a really good fit. It's a high. He comes from one highly prestigious academic institution to another one, and he can really instill that defense. And if it's you need to play some solid defense if you're going to be able to compete in the SEC, and I think Derek Mason will be able to do that at Vanderbilt. Uh, the Commodores were 9-4 and 4-4 in the SEC last year. They got a win over their in-state rivals Tennessee, which is big. I think that's their second year in a row that they've beaten them. They beat Houston in the BBVA Compass Bowl, so I believe they went to a bowl game every single year that James Franklin was there and won their bowl game all but 1 year. I remember they lost to Cincinnati, I think, in his first year. But they're returning 7 starters on offense, 3 on defense, so a lot of there are going to be a lot of new faces on that Commodore defense. They're returning quite a bit of starters on offense. They're mainly on the offensive line and in the backfield. Uh, Key losses: they lose Jordan Matthews, who I think was one of the best receivers in the country and probably one of the top uh, 3 best receivers in the SEC last year. There's a lot of good receivers in college football last year, and he was one of them. Whenever they needed a big play, that's usually who they looked for, and he usually came up with it. And I remember the Ole Miss game last year really stands out to me. He's on the field puking 1 second, and then a couple seconds later, he's making just a huge catch. I remember the ball was probably a little bit overthrown, but he just extended his arms out and snagged it. And that was an incredible catch and an incredible game, which Vanderbilt unfortunately fell up a little short in. They lose Jonathan Kraus, who was probably their other biggest big play receiver, and I'm really concerned about this Vanderbilt receiving core this year. I mean, who's going to step up and make plays? I know they recruited a couple good receivers while James Franklin was there, so we'll see if those guys step up. I don't know their names, but I remember there was one guy who said he was going to be a biochemical engineer or something when he signed with Vanderbilt. I know he was a highly touted recruit, so we'll see if he uh, shapes up to be a big time player for them. They basically lose their entire secondary. Uh, Andre Howell, Javon Marshall, Kenny Ladler, and Stephen Clark. Stephen Clark made a lot of big plays last year. I remember him when I was watching the highlights from Vanderbilt last year. It seemed like every other game he was intercepting it and taking it the other way and deep into the other team's territory. So Stephen Clark is a they've been missing over the past couple years. They've been missing that secondary player like Casey Hayward, who was really making big time interceptions in crucial times, getting those turnovers that Vanderbilt needs to be able to compete against some of the top teams in the SEC. So they're going to have a lot of work to do in the secondary as well. They lose Austin Carter Samuels, who uh, played some last year. They kind of played a couple different quarterbacks last year. Austin Carter Samuels was not nothing special, kind of a game manager type quarterback, which they never really had a great quarterback since James Franklin's been there. They haven't really had a very good quarterback since Jay Cutler. So they really have these game manager type guys, and they lose pretty much their entire defense, which is not good. But their defense wasn't anything spectacular. So when you lose a lot of players who weren't necessarily that great to begin with, it opens up a door for you to be better, and you could be worse. So it could go either way. But they'll be young on the defense, so we'll see what happens there. Key returnees, the return sophomore quarterback Patton Robinette. I assume he's going to be the starter, although they're having a four-way quarterback battle right now. That happens anytime you get a new coach. Uh, Includes Johnny McCrary, Stephen Rivers, and Wade Frebick. So I definitely think Robinette will get the nod there. He started 10 games last year, so he really returned experience, and he's a sophomore, so well, he's returning experience, and he could be the future. So anytime you have that combination, I think Robinette definitely has the advantage. Uh, they returned Jerron Seymour, who I think is their best player on offense, maybe their best player on this entire team, from what I saw uh, when I was watching the highlights. This seems to be the best player they have returning. Reminds me of a lot of Zach Stacy, which he was a really good back a couple years ago. One of the big playmakers for one of the biggest playmakers in the James Franklin era at Vanderbilt, besides Jordan Matthews. A shorter guy, short, stocky, but pretty fast. And he's not necessarily a straight power back, not necessarily a straight speed back, but kind of a mix in between. And I think he's going to be your best playmaker this year at Vanderbilt. Really like Jerron Seymour. Let's get into the 2014 schedule for the Vanderbilt Commodores. They start out with Temple. I believe they played Temple. Yeah, I think they played Temple last year. They always play Temple and UMass. Seems like that's their season opener on Thursday night, same night as Texas A&M and South Carolina and Ole Miss and Boise. So they should start out with a win against Temple. Uh, you know, they're not the typical cupcake, but they're not definitely not a powerhouse. And then they play Ole Miss in Nashville in the Titans Stadium. So I remember them talking about possibly doing that a couple years ago, playing a game or two in the Titans Stadium. So I guess they finally decided to do that. And Ole Miss and Vandy had a thriller last year, but I think Ole Miss is going to be a little bit too much this year. Then they host UMass, which should be another win. Did they? I think they played 2 years ago, or they may have played. I can't remember if they played at Temple last year or at UMass. It was one or the other, and they had a tough game. I think it was Temple, but UMass shouldn't have too much trouble with them. Uh, I think these smaller teams could hang around with Vandy for a little bit, because I really think they're trying to replace too much Vanderbilt, and James Franklin recruited well, but I don't think he recruited well enough for these guys to come in and play and be really good immediately. I think it's going to take him a couple of years, but they should get the win over UMass, and then they host South Carolina. Uh, I think South Carolina uh, went up big on Vanderbilt last year, but Vanderbilt marched back to make it an interesting game. But South Carolina ultimately won by quite a bit. South Carolina shouldn't have much trouble here. Then they go to Kentucky, and I think this is going to be a great game. If you watch my Kentucky preview, I did pick Kentucky to win this game. It really could go either way, but I like Kentucky to get this one at home. And then they go to Georgia, which is going to be a very difficult game. If you're returning, three starters on defense, it's going to be really hard to stop that running game of Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall. So I think that's ultimately going to be too tall of a task for Vanderbilt. Then they host Charleston Southern, and should be an easy win. Don't see any reason why not. I think there's someone else who plays Charleston Southern next year. Then they have a bye week before they go to Missouri, and I like Missouri to pick up a win here. Two pretty even teams, I think, but this really could go either way. But I like Missouri. Both teams are going to have a lot of new faces, but I like Missouri to get the win at home. Then they have Old Dominion, which shouldn't give them too much trouble. Then they have Florida at home, and I think they're going to struggle to score points on Florida. Uh, just trying to replace too much. Florida's defense is going to be really stout, I think, and but they can keep it close just because until Florida shows me anything on offense, I think Florida is that anybody who plays Florida is going to be in the game. Florida's not going to blow anyone out. So if you play Florida, you have a fighter's chance. Then they have a bye before they go to Mississippi State, and Mississippi State I think is the dark horse, one of the dark horses in the West this year. So going to have a lot of trouble stopping Dak Prescott and that Mississippi State offense. They're going to be able to run the ball uh, with a lot of success on Vanderbilt, and at Starkville, it's going to be a tough place to play this year, and I like Mississippi State to get the win there. And then they host Vanderbilt in the season finale, or excuse me, they host Tennessee in the season finale, and I like how they play at the end of the year now. That's the way it should be, I think. And Tennessee, I think, reached. I actually think Vanderbilt has a good chance in this game. I think they'll get fired up at home to keep that state championship in Nashville. I think they'll put up a good fight, but I think they'll come up a little bit short, and Tennessee ultimately gets the win. So let's count up their wins here. 1, 2, 3. I got them getting 4 wins. Unfortunately, no wins in the SEC. So that's really disappointing coming off a 9-win year. But that's part of it if you lose such a quality coach such as James Franklin. But I like Derek Mason. I think he will ultimately get this program back to where James Franklin had it. I don't know if he can get to. I don't know if he can get if he can do too much better than that. But I think he can get to the 7, 8, 9 wins a year that James Franklin was doing. He's kind of similar to James Franklin in a lot of ways, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing. So I think in a couple years, maybe next year, a year or two, he will get Vanderbilt back into the bowl game and kind of be relevant again. But I think that does it for my 2014 Vanderbilt preview. If you're a Vanderbilt fan, I wish you luck this year. And as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.